So I want to tell you the story of Crystal Mason, if you haven't heard it already. And if you have, you know exactly where the story is about to go. Crystal Mason is a mother of three living in Fort Worth, Texas, right outside of Dallas. And in the 2016 election, she went to her local polling place. She said she wanted to set an example for her kids and make sure that they knew that voting was one of the most important things they could do. She walked up and found out that her name was actually not on the list. And so she filed, as people often do, a provisional ballot. It's happened to me before. It just means that you sign a piece of paper saying that you can vote and you fill out your ballot, put it in an envelope, and it gets sent to the Board of Elections. What she didn't know is that she was, in fact, ineligible to vote. She had served 5 years for tax fraud. She was on supervised release, and she had been abiding by all of the rules of said release. And she, along with 500,000 other Texans, are ineligible to vote for the exact same reason, that they had committed a second-degree felony. Because she didn't know this at the time, and because she did not see on that piece of paper a line that says that you swear by signing this that you are eligible to vote, she is now facing 5 years in prison in the state of Texas. This is exactly what we mean when we talk about voter intimidation. 5 years for going to exercise your right to vote in order to send a message to other people that you might as well go ahead and stay home. The wild part of all of this is not only that she's facing 5 years for this simple act, but that actually voter fraud is not a widespread problem across the country or even in Fort Worth, Texas. In fact, people not voting enough is the problem that they are facing. 6% of eligible voters actually voted in the last midterms in Fort Worth, and 1.5% of those who are eligible to vote between the ages of 18 and 35 voted in Fort Worth. And so for trying to exercise that right to vote, not being aware that she was ineligible, which, by the way, shouldn't even be the case, she is now facing 5 years in prison. Crystal Mason is someone who we should be thinking about every single time we have an opportunity to vote, because her and 500,000 other people, 1.5 million people in the state of Florida, people all over this country are being turned away at the ballot box because they committed a crime, and even though they've paid their debt to society, are not eligible to participate in the citizenry as we all are. I'm disgusted by the outcome of this case, and it's something that we should all be thinking about as we continue to fight to re-enfranchise voters all across this country.
So I have 3 observations about this case. The first is that this is clearly an attempt at using this one case in order to set an example to suppress the vote writ large, right? For people who don't know whether they are eligible to vote. So, we've talked about this in the past. In addition to the 6 million people who are prohibited from voting currently because of a felony conviction, there are another 6 million people who actually are eligible to vote, who've served the terms of their sentence, but don't know that they are eligible to vote. And that is because in many cases, when you are released from prison, when your term is up and you've served your time, oftentimes states don't even notify you that you now have the ability to vote in states that don't permanently disenfranchise you, which is most states. And so, by doing this and setting sort of an example by severely punishing somebody who didn't even know that they couldn't vote, that dissuades this broader population of millions of people from being able to cast a vote. Because, who's going to vote if the potential punishment for being wrong about your eligibility to vote is 5 years in prison? The second observation is how different the criminal justice system approaches a Black woman who didn't know whether or not she could vote, and a white male potential Supreme Court nominee who lied multiple times in this confirmation hearing. Many people are saying that he committed perjury, but the thing is that with perjury, a crime that oftentimes is levied against people in positions of power who are often under oath, that you have to prove intent. Right. So you would have to prove that he intentionally didn't know or that he intentionally knew what he was saying was a lie and that he lied anyway under oath. Whereas in this case, they didn't have to prove intent at all. In fact, she didn't intentionally, commit a crime. She didn't even know in the first place that she couldn't vote. And so that sort of double standard in how the law is written and who those laws tend to be applied to is sort of creates this double standard where we see people going to jail for things that are far less severe and consequential than some of the things that we see folks like Brett Kavanaugh getting away with that impact so many people.
Yeah, I think you all both gave really important and comprehensive sort of frameworks around why this is so important. And for me, just a couple observations. One, I mean, obviously this is super relevant in Texas because lots of polls are showing that Beto O'Rourke is within striking distance, literally within a point or two of Ted Cruz. And this is for the first time that a Texas race for the Senate has been that close in decades, I think. And so, this is literally every vote matters. I think I read that there were 600,000 people who were disenfranchised from access to the polls as a result of voter disenfranchisement laws in Texas. And if you consider, how close this race could very well be, only a couple dozen votes in every precinct will matter. But more generally, with regard to the relationship between voter suppression and Black folks, I think, what's an interesting thing to think about is that if you look at the top 10 Blackest states in the United States, 9 of them don't let you vote if you're serving any type of sentence. And 5 of the 10 Blackest states restrict your vote even after you've served your sentence. And in what surely, must be a coincidence, Maine and Vermont are the 2 whitest states in the country, and they are also the 2 states that allow people to vote while they are in prison. Not after they have been released, but literally while the people are still incarcerated. And so it is difficult to believe that it is merely happenstance that the whitest states in the country, the most homogeneously white states in the country, allow people to vote while they're still in prison, while 9 of the 10 states with the highest Black populations per capita don't let you vote if you're serving any type of sentence, whether it be parole, probation, what have you. And so, these statistics, I think we can throw statistics at folks as a means of trying to communicate how important and urgent and relevant these things are. And sometimes those can get lost, but I think this is really important in understanding the fundamental relationship of racism and the legacy of Jim Crow to the sort of contemporary policies around voting and voting access that exist today. And it is still, I think, also often people attempt to disaggregate and disentangle the conversation around voter suppression from, people will say, oh, well, voter suppression exists, but, that is different than the people who simply don't vote. I think we fail to understand the myriad of ways by which voter suppression acts upon communities, even when some of the people within those communities could still ostensibly vote. But if there is a sort of large, massive voter suppression and intimidation, as is exemplified by the story that Brittany talked about, we have to account for the ways in which that sort of larger cloak of fear and intimidation shapes what the turnout is going to look like for a larger community of people.